Now getting into the knife, you'll see that this is an overall length of 12¼ inches. So this is quite a long blade. Now by design, that basically gives you a 5¾ inch cutting edge on this blade with a nice, generous finger choil, quality guard to protect your fingers, and an oversized handle capable of giving you multiple positions of grip. So here you'll see a number of knives that you probably recognize. A number of these that I've reviewed on the channel, some of them that I haven't. There's a little gap there. Well, the reason why is that I feel as though the TFK T17 kind of fits right about there. So, for example, here you have a BK7 moving down past a RAT7 and an SE6, down past that TFK T17 into a Benchmade Arvensis, Boker Vox Rold, and a Steel Will Roamer 305. Now all of these I would put in a classification that I would say are pretty much a quality woods, wilderness, and in some regards survival blade. Some of these more survival than others, but in that regard I would say most of these fit in a general classification that are pretty much the same. And it gives you a good overall comparison of where the TFK T17 fits in the mix. So stacking it up against some of these other blades, obviously a lot of different shapes and sizes, different steels, different handle designs and constructions, and it gives you kind of an overall on what this T17 looks like against some of the competition. Now, one of the things I think is kind of ridiculous is the fact that I've complained in the past about undersized handles really bothering me. And as you look at these knives, of all the blades out here, I feel like mine is the thinnest handle. Now, there are a couple of things that I'm going to point out, but that's just an initial impression just by physically looking at these. It does appear as though my handle is actually the smallest of all of these. However, looks can be deceiving, and I will give you some examples. Now, obviously, my handle's not nearly the same size as one of these Becker BK handles. There's no way. But if I told you that overall, that handle was similar in general size to maybe, say, the Boker Vox Rold, or even this Arvensis, you would maybe be surprised at an initial glance. However, what I can tell you is this handle is actually bigger than this handle. So when I first got my hands on the T17, I was just a little bit nervous thinking that I undersized the handle. Now the more and more I hold on to this, the more and more it feels great in my hands. The reality is if you look at my grip, when I grip the knife very naturally, you'll see that I have approximately 1 finger spacing between my index finger and the meat of my hand, and then at that, these 2 fingers are just touching the meat of my hand right here. So basically that is my natural grip. So gripping the Benchmade Arvensis, trying to get a nice natural grip. What throws this off is the finger guard and the ramp on top, so my thumb takes a different position than on the T17. However, when you look at the position of these fingers, here you will see these just so slightly touch the meat of my palm, just exactly the same as the T17. So the handle diameter in this area is pretty much exactly the same as on the TFK T17. Now granted, here you do have a little bit of a different gap, but keeping in mind the fact that this ramp pushes my thumb in a slightly different position. Now similarly, taking a look at the Boker Vox Rold, taking a nice natural position with my hands, again, you'll see that my fingers here are just touching the meat of my palm, maybe just a little bit less than on the T17, basically being because of the position of this little hump in the handle, kind of spans my finger out just a little bit different, but then when you look at my index finger, you get that exact finger spacing right there. So I feel as though the handle on the Boker Vox Rold is extremely similar to on the T17. Now the SE6 definitely has a little bit of a larger handle. You'll see here as I grip it naturally, there is a gap here. So this handle is much more square and also larger. So it is a larger grip. Now, after gripping both of these knives, what I can say is this definitely, and for really the knife that built my channel and is one of the sort of like my most favorite knives I have, really at this point feels very square to me. That is one of the things I get out of this T17 is a very natural ergonomic handle, which I am growing to absolutely love, and that was by design. So here, having that nice palm swell right in the middle of the handle gives it some more girth. Now it is surprising, you'd be a little bit surprised to see, however, the handle on the T17 is thicker overall in the palm area than the SE6. And that's what allows this to fill out your hand nicely. I would say little more comfortably. It's a little more narrow in your pivot point, but fills out the back side of your hand great, and that's where a lot of your control comes from. You'll see how this flares out towards the back side. It is very natural and comfortable to grip, and with the long handle, gives you a great balance. We worked a long time on trying to get the perfect balance right on that fulcrum point. So this is very neutrally balanced right at that finger guard. Gives this knife a wonderful balance and is something that's very wieldy and moves nicely in your hands. One of the features that I greatly liked on the Benchmade Arvensis was these nice little scalloped handle scales here. It does give you the ability to get a little closer on the blade and have some alternate grips. Now these are very pronounced and in a way kind of abrupt. On the T17, we did add scalloped handle scales, but a little less abrupt. And I can say that is very, very comfortable. You can kind of pinch the knife and really get some good control there. I like the overall feel of the handles. I think they have a nice texture that at first I was really worried they were going to be overly aggressive and create hot spots, but my impression at this point is that they probably won't. I think where I might struggle with it just a bit is on chopping tasks. I'll be curious to see how that feels when I get further into testing and doing the field review, whether or not these handle scales actually give me any hot spots. Now gripping the blade further up on the choil, this feels unbelievable. If you know me, you know I like a knife with a finger choil. A lot of my favorite blades, like the Arvensis, like the SE6, like the Boker Vox Rold, all have a finger choil. However, I feel as though, for example, this Arvensis having that ramp, and granted I ground mine down, definitely has a disadvantage where you have to span your thumb over that ramp to get a good quality purchase on the knife. The SE6, again, being a little more square and a little bit knobby, and the more and more I hold this, I can't believe how different it feels than some of these other blades. It is just so blocky and square, and not only the SE6, but even more so the Ontario Rat 7, just very, very blocky and square feeling in the hand. And as I continue to use these other blades, I'm actually very, very impressed at how good this T17 does feel in the hand. Again, keeping in mind I was very nervous about this going into it, and I'm starting to get more and more assured that this is the proper geometry and the right size handle. Now, as I mentioned, the handle on the T17 is an upscaled T7 handle. So I think we made a small miscalculation. So if you look at the little scalloped area where your index finger and your thumb come together right at that pivot point, this area is almost perfect for the size of your finger. And what that does is gives you a nice grip where the little hump area actually falls right between your two fingers and never really bothers you. So that is a very natural grip that feels very good when you hold the knife. That was one of the things I greatly liked about this T7, was the overall comfort and ergonomics. So then we upscaled the handle for the T17. But when we did that, we also pulled this notch further back towards the back of the blade. Now in reality, if you think about the nature of the human hand, obviously we upscaled the handle, but you're not upscaling your finger. So in reality, I feel as though this notch should be maybe 1/4 of an inch closer towards that guard, which would index with your finger a little bit tighter. And then, even more importantly, if you look here, if you go for that natural grip, your middle finger lands right on that hump. So in reality, what I would like to do is tighten this space up just a little bit and get it closer to the T7 the way the handle was originally intended. And even furthermore, when you grab the knife up by the choil, that means you put your index finger into the finger choil, you bring your middle finger into that finger groove, and then you're trying to get your ring finger onto the handle. Well, again, your ring finger falls right on that hump, and I'm afraid that would either create a tiny little hot spot or just, quite frankly, not be optimum. I feel as though if this was brought forward 1/4 of an inch, then my finger would fit perfectly. That hump would aid in retention and your overall purchase on the blade, with that hump falling directly between your two fingers in a nice, comfortable, and natural grip. However, even with this, the exact way it is, it does feel great in the hand. Generally speaking, very, very comfortable, very balanced. I like the way it fills out my hand. I feel as though it feels very comfortable and natural. The contouring is very well done, nicely rounded, and absolutely perfectly finished. And when I talk about perfectly finished, everything about this TFK build, the fit and finish is spectacular. They did a marvelous job. Absolutely perfectly finished. Every single detail, they nailed it. Not a single sharp spot anywhere to be had. Perfectly sharpened all the way down the blade. A beautiful, absolutely perfectly done acid stonewash finish. Nice, mild jimping that's not too tough on your fingers. It's rounded out just a bit, gives you that sort of middle ground between a sharp jimping and a mild jimping, so I would call it sort of medium. Just gorgeous work on the handle scales, perfectly done. That nice overall 3D G10 contoured handles with those scallops, nicely recessed hardware. These bolts are just perfectly located and nicely done. A generous lanyard hole, which I greatly like. I think companies sometimes go a little small on their lanyard holes, so this was by design a little bit larger to accommodate larger lanyards. A nice 3/16 of an inch quality spine, reasonably square. I'm thinking that this will probably spark a ferro rod nicely and do some general scraping tasks. However, there is a second blade we're going to take a look at here, which also has a completely squared off spine. This has a nice saber grind, beautifully done. I am hoping this geometry is about perfect, but we'll only know once we start using the knife. I worked a long time to get this blade shape the way I saw it in mind. Almost a reverse Tanto design. I have some knives that have drop points. I have some knives that are Tantos. This to me is sort of like a middle ground, which I think is pretty cool, and I'm hoping it works out very well for overall wilderness and survival tasks. Now, I also wanted a blade that had tactical applications in mind. So where this is a nice pronounced tip, and when you look at it, quite stout. The overall grind and geometry leaves a good stout tip, and the capability to drill, to stab, and I don't know about prying, but I'm certainly going to try. I think this blade has certainly a lot of different applications from the wilderness, survival, woodscraft, and even tactical applications. And to me, that was one of the keys about the finish. If you look at this TFK T7, this is the 1.2379 D2 tool steel. However, it is basically a hand finish, satin finish, which is beautiful for this knife, but is not great for tactical applications. And that's where the acid stonewash finish comes into play. Beautifully done, but most importantly, muting the blade so it is not overly reflective. That gives it a little more of a stealth look and is an excellent overall finish for aesthetics and also tactical applications. If you look at the overall detail work, they did an excellent job getting this logo beautifully laser etched. It is absolutely pristine. Now, we did spend a lot of time trying to figure out what order to get everything done in, and we ended up doing all the laser etching at the very end, which makes perfect sense, so it came out super crisp and looks absolutely wonderful. With the outer Limitless logo on the right side of the blade, and the TFK logo and model on the left side of the blade. Now, that is one thing I like about the acid stonewash finish. Generally, I do not like coated blades. So, for example, like on this Rat 7, it is a coated blade. Now, like on my SE6 here, I did remove that, added my own patina and finish, and I do that a lot to blades. So, say, for example, my BK7, again, stripped and patinaed the blade. Now, a lot of these have finishes that would be very difficult to take off, so I have not stripped them. But in my opinion, if you look at it, I honestly think out of all of these knives that this finish is the nicest. It is actually beautifully done. I am very blown away at how nice of a job TFK did with this finish. The second best finish on this entire table in my mind would be this Mr. Blade Protector. This is a gorgeous finish. This is also D2 tool steel with almost an acid stonewash finish. And then comparing these two side by side, here you see the Protector and the T17. Both nicely done. The Protector at this point has been used quite a bit, so the finish is a little bit weathered, but you'll see there a little bit of shine underneath. Overall, nicely done. And the T17 looks a little more, I'd say, I don't know, stonish, something like that. Has a little more grain to it, a little more variability in the pattern. This is a little more even. This has a little more general swirliness and, I don't know, like I said, a little more kind of a stone look.